Mangwanani Banave Africa. Welcome to Africa Good Morning, the news and current affairs show bringing you everything you need to know happening on the African continent and beyond. You are joined by Ashwin Betty and Aina Raizakweyo.
All right, in today's broadcast, Central African Republic President gets unlimited terms in power. Power cuts in Niger threaten to spoil millions of vaccines as sanctions take their toll. This is according to the UN. And Senegal repatriates 40 survivors of deadly crossing in Cape Verde. Now you can follow all our programs on our website called oneup2.com, as well as DSTV 285 and GoTV 25 in Namibia. Later on, we bring you the news from the Rainbow Nation with Ari Hoha.
But prior to that, since this is a current affairs show, we are focusing on the most current thing happening in the Southern African region right now, and that is Zimbabwe heading to elections today. Here's a bit of an update on how that is transpiring. President Mnangagwa has been canvassing to win a second term by giving away not just shirts, but also free chicken meals, loaves of bread, and all-night concerts. The cost of such things has soared in the Southern African country as it grapples with one of the world's highest inflation rates. But besides the giveaways, the run-up to the vote has seen some of the violence and intimidation tactics familiar to Zimbabweans around election season. Mnangagwa, an 80-year-old former spy chief, came to power through a coup to replace longtime leader Robert Mugabe in 2017 and declared victory in a disputed election the following year. In a field of nearly a dozen presidential candidates, the incumbent's main challenger is Nelson Chamisa, 45, of the Citizens Coalition for Change, who narrowly lost to Mnangagwa in 2018. But the opposition has struggled to campaign. More than 100 CCC rallies have been banned since by-elections held in March last year. Currently, 40 opposition supporters, including a parliamentary candidate, have been jailed and denied bail for holding an unauthorized car rally in Harare, the capital. We certainly wish that Zimbabweans can head to the polls in a peaceful manner, and may the people's will be reflected in the result. Our top stories after the break.
In our top story this morning, the Central African Republic's top court has approved the outcome of the July referendum that increases the length of a presidential term to 7 years and removes a limit on re-election. The court declared that an overwhelming majority of 95% approved the vote and turnout at just above 57%. The new law creates an office of a vice president appointed by president and the unicameral parliament, doing away with a senate. It also bans politicians with dual citizenship from running for president and increases the number of Supreme Court judges from 9 to 11. The top court had last September scrapped the committee tasked with drafting the new law before the court's president Daniel Delan was forcibly retired.
Now, the UN is spending over 20 times more money than usual on fuel for generators to keep millions of vaccines in Niger from spoiling due to insistent power cuts. The outages are the result of severe economic and travel sanctions imposed by regional countries after mutinous soldiers toppled the country's president last month. Country representative for the United Nations Children's Fund in Niger, Stefano Savi, said it has spent $200,000 powering generators to keep vaccines including for polio and rotavirus, across the country called during the first 3 weeks of August. That's up from approximately $10,000 a month previously and might soon run out of money, he said. Niger relies on neighboring Nigeria for up to 90% of its power, but after soldiers ousted democratically elected President Mohamed Bazoum in July, Nigeria cut off part of its electricity supply as part of sanctions imposed by the West African Regional Bloc, ECOWAS. The sanctions are taking a toll on the population, with the price of goods rising, residents unable to easily access cash, and people living in the dark.
In our next story, Senegal repatriates 40 survivors of deadly crossing in Cape Verde. Senegal repatriated on Monday from Cape Verde some 40 nationals who survived a crossing which was to take them to Europe and which cost the lives of around 60 migrants, AFP journalist noted. The survivors, all men, mostly young and rescued last week aboard a canoe of Cape Verde, were brought back to the country by a Senegalese military plane which landed at the end of the afternoon at an air base in the center of Dakar. They were part of hundreds of Senegalese and Bissau Guinean who embarked on the July 10 in a fishing town of Fassaboe West to try to reach Europe by the Atlantic along the African coast. The boat was spotted on the 14th of August of the Cape Verdean archipelago with officially 38 survivors. Rescuers recovered 7 bodies.
Now, a disease linked to poverty and malnutrition that once crippled crowded slums in the 19th century in Britain is on the rise in Scotland, according to data which was published at the weekend. A total of 442 cases of rickets, a skeletal disease caused by a sustained lack of vitamin D, were recorded in 2002 compared to 354 in 2018. Data from 13 of 14 Scottish health boards showed generally preventable conditions such as these are indicative of Scotland having the lowest life expectancy in the UK. Chris Williams, the joint chair of the Royal College of General Practitioners Scotland, told the Sunday Times newspaper. He also suggested environmental factors such as a colder climate could be behind the increase. Rickets, which can lead to skeletal deformities such as bowed legs or knock knees, has been linked to a lack of exposure to sunlight and vitamin D, which is found in foods like oily fish or eggs.
Niger suspended by African Union after coup. The African Union has suspended Niger from all its activities following the military coup last month. The AU Peace and Security Council called on all of its member states and the international community to refrain from any action that could legitimize the junta in Niger. It reiterated calls for the coup leaders to release the presidential-elect Mohamed Bazoum. The West African Regional grouping ECOWAS has already threatened military action to reinstate him. Niger's junta has said that civilian rule cannot be restored for 3 years, but this has been dismissed by ECOWAS as unacceptable.
That brings us to the end of our top stories on Africa. Good morning. Now, the BRICS conference is underway in Johannesburg, and after the break, Ari Hohad will be updating us on that story and more from South Africa. Stay with us.
Welcome to My.NA Cars, your ultimate destination for everything automotive.
I am your host, Diana Master. Teamwork makes the dream work, right?
Discover the latest models, innovative technologies, and expert insights from our passionate hosts. Learn essential maintenance tips and get exclusive behind-the-scenes access to the automotive industry. Don't miss My.NA Cars on NTV every Thursday at 2100 hours. Tune in and ignite your passion for automobiles.
All right, it's time to cross over to Ari Hohad in South Africa as he updates us on the news stories in Mzansi, the Rainbow Nation. You choose one here. Now, the BRICS conference started in Johannesburg, and South Africa seemed destined to sign several agreements with the People's Republic of China. Please tell us about that and everything else you brought for us, Ari.
Yes, very good morning, Ashwin and Aina and everyone. Yes, BRICS are happening at the moment. They started yesterday, will continue till tomorrow. We talked a lot about BRICS and all maybe the agreements that we can expect. It's not all known at the moment, obviously, but the one that's known is 11 agreements. 11 agreements signed yesterday between South Africa and China, and one of them is related to energy and electricity and also emergency equipment, etc., for South Africa. So the other 10 we don't know, so we don't expect to hear everything, obviously. But the message is just briefly from the floor, a strong message from Xi Jinping from China that the very big allegations against the US, so he was very strong against the US, saying that they must stop the China containing, and then also a pre-recorded message from Minister Vladimir Putin all the way from Russia. And he also had quite a few strong words against the USA, again, for all the sanctions imposed against Russia. So that's all the things from the podium. It was Brazil's president that still said that they need a currency. BRICS need a currency to trade in, but the South African Minister of Finance indicated yesterday that is Enoch Gondwana. He said that the dollar for now is here to stay. So lots of intriguing things coming from the floor. We won't know what's happening in the boardrooms, probably everything. But we do know is that South Africa and China strengthened trade quite a bit. South Africa in the last 3 months exported 450 billion rand worth of goods to China. So it's a big partner. So it's the 15th BRICS, and South Africa joined in 2010. And between the 5 nations, it's 40% of the world's population and 26% of the world's trade. So it's a strong group together, and hopefully it will benefit South Africa. South Africa didn't walk away from the US and the West, of course. There's still the AGOA trade agreement. So South Africa trying to find a balance. The message from Minister or President Ramaphosa was more to focus on reform. So we'll follow this, and hopefully it will be good for South Africa.
All right, Ari, we understand that 6 accused pleaded guilty to the murder of Babita, who was a whistleblower in the Tembisa Hospital fraud investigation. Tell us about this.
Yes, we spoke about it a week or two ago as well. And for those that didn't hear that, at the time, it's a whistleblower. It is Babita Diukaman. And she flagged payments from the Tembisa Hospital worth almost R1 billion South African rand. And at the time, she was the Chief Director of Financial Accounting at the Department of Health in Gauteng. There she is. Sad thing is that she was gunned down in her own driveway just 3 weeks after flagging all those suspicious transactions. She died, unfortunately, so she was killed. And so what happened in court was the 6 that was accused, they had a plea agreement, and they were said that they're guilty. They will get punishment between 6 and 24 years. Important thing is that now they're chasing the kingpin. So hopefully the 6 accused did give information that the kingpin, the person behind all of this, will be caught. And so that is ongoing. President Ramaphosa also appointed a committee to investigate all of this.
All right. Now, South Africa continues to have daily load shedding as Eskom warns that high winds driven by a strong cold front over the Western Cape could further hamper power supply. Could you please expand on that?
Yeah, just for the region of the Western Cape, it was a very cold and wet and windy day yesterday, raining all day yesterday, and that's what it looked like all of yesterday. Strong winds, so there's lots of damage, and that does affect the infrastructure. There's things that blown over, etc. So it makes it difficult for Eskom to keep up. As it is, it's difficult to generate, and now they need to have the infrastructure working as well. So that is Koeberg. News from Cape Town is that Koeberg Unit 1 will only be online on the 3rd of November. That will be 5 months late. So there's 3 units in Koeberg, important for South Africa, capacity of 970 megawatts each. So when number 1 is back, then later in the year, number 2 will go on service as well, being out for 10 months. So that is relative. But that's what it looks like when the wind is too strong in Cape Town. But we did have good electricity yesterday. This morning, there's no load shedding at the moment in the Cape. So there's later today. So it's not the big 6 load shedding phase 6, but it seems to be 2 at the moment.
All right, Ari, we understand that Siya Kolisi is now back from an injury, and people are excited for him to end the Springboks at large to defend their title in France. Tell us about this.
Yes, he's our captain. He's our aspirational captain, and we saw him lifting the trophy in Japan 4 years ago. So hopefully it can happen again. He was injured. He came back from injury. There is proudly with the president. So he came back in a friendly game against Wales. He will play again on Friday against the All Blacks, a friendly game, a warm-up game. And then hopefully he'll be ready to play on the 10th of September against Scotland, their first game. So we South Africans, we draw strength from all these team events, like we did when the South African women's soccer team won the African Cup of Nations recently. If we don't win, then we just continue to cry. That's what we do in South Africa. But we draw strength from this, and Siya Kolisi is our captain, and we're very proud of him, and hopefully we'll lead South Africa again to a World Cup victory this year in France.
All right, Ari, listen, as long as the South Africans stick to the braai and the Namibians stick to the biltong, we are all right. Let's not have any crossing of the lines. Thank you very much, Ari, for bringing us the news stories from South Africa.
It's a big pleasure and a brilliant day for everyone. Bye-bye. Bye.
All right, let's have a look at the weather predictions. Perhaps we can hope that that cold front in the Western Cape hasn't settled in Windhoek, but considering earlier this morning, it could be on its way. Have a look.
In our economic news this morning, Indonesia's Pertamina Geothermal explores partnership with a Kenyan firm. Pertamina Geothermal Energy, a unit of Indonesian state energy firm Pertamina, has signed initial agreement with two Kenyan companies to explore partnerships in geothermal power projects. Indonesia Foreign Minister said PGE signed a memorandum of understanding with the Geothermal Development Company to explore a partnership that could be worth $1.5 billion and a separate memorandum of understanding with Africa Geothermal International No. 1 Ltd for a potentially $700 million deal, Retno Mosarudi said.
Now, oil companies in Mozambique have invested more than 1.8 billion euro in hydrocarbon exploration projects since 2006 that are awaiting development plans for a final investment decision, according to data from state oil company ENH. In its report and accounts for 2022 consulted by Lusa on Monday, Empresa Nacional de Hidrocarbonetos, an oil company owned by the Mozambican state, said that it has invested $264,158,273 since 2006 in projects that it will transfer to the company's balance sheet after approval of the development plan and/or final investment decision. That brings us to the end of our economic news stories. Your sports stories come after the break. You're still with Africa. Good morning. Let's dive straight into the sports news, and we start off with an absolute legend in our time. Kenyan middle distance superstar Faith Kipyegon capped a year that brought her a trio of world records by claiming a hat-trick of world 1,500 meters gold medals as she ran a perfect race to come home in 3 minutes 54 seconds and 87 split seconds in Tuesday's final. Kipyegon, the double Olympic champion, has not lost over the distance for 2 years. Still only 29, Budapest is her 6th World Championships, and she now has a remarkable haul of 3 golds, 2 silvers, and a 5th place on her debut in 2013. Avoiding any risk of a fall, Kipyegon hits the front from the start, though keeping a controlled pace, with the rest of the field effectively running for minor medals.
In our next story, Liverpool wins appeal against McAllister's red card. Liverpool midfielder McAllister's red card in Saturday's 3-1 Premier League win over Bournemouth has been overturned following a successful appeal to the FA, the club said on Tuesday. McAllister was shown a red card for high tackle on Ryan Christie in the 58th minute. The sending off seemed harsh, with Bournemouth manager Andoni Iraola saying after the match that it did not look like a red card.
Now, former Zimbabwe cricket captain Heath Streak, who had been undergoing treatment for cancer, has died at the age of 49. His former teammate Henry Olonga said late on Tuesday the all-rounder was the all-time leading test wicket taker for his country. He took 216 wickets and scored 1,990 runs in 65 tests between 1993 and 2005. He also played in 189 one-day internationals, scoring 2,943 runs and taking 239 wickets. You know, if you grow up in Zimbabwe, sometimes it's hard to fight off the feeling that your best days are behind you. And it gets even sadder when you lose the people who made the good old days good. Rest in peace, Heath Streak. Highlights after the break.
Welcome to Active Kids, a daily TV show that sparks creativity, learning, and fun for young minds. With exciting activities and lessons, Active Kids inspires curiosity and a love for learning.
New face to the 15.
The perfect mix of play and education. Don't miss out on the fun. Tune into Active Kids on NTV every weekday at 10 o'clock and let the adventure begin.
Thank you for staying with Africa. Good morning on Wednesday, the 23rd of August. Let's get into the highlights from this morning's broadcast. CAR president gets unlimited terms in power. Power cuts in Niger threaten to spoil millions of vaccines as sanctions take their toll, UN says. Senegal repatriates 40 survivors of deadly crossing in Cape Verde. Victorian-era disease hits Scotland's poorest. Niger suspended by African Union after coup. Indonesia's Pertamina Geothermal explores partnership with Kenyan firms. Mozambique oil companies invest over 1.8 billion euro in exploration since 2006. Those have been our stories.
Thank you so much for joining our edition of Africa Good Morning today. We will be back tomorrow, same time.